obscure world of parking. We use it every day, but have we really capitalized on the intricacies of our industry? In this podcast, the Parking Network will go behind the scenes and talk to industry professionals about all things parking, from the horizon of evolving technology and even stories of the old days. We hope to encourage and inspire operators and property managers alike to look at parking through a new lens. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Our Parking Industry Podcast. This is season 3, the very first episode, and we are delighted that you are here with us. I am Krista O'Lean, and I'm joined by Lee Thomas. And today, for episode 1 of season 3, we have the pleasure of interviewing the Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti on a current case dealing with the parking industry. We have some roots in Tennessee. Clyde Wilson, our founder, is a Tennessee native. He was born in Lebanon, grew up in Donaldson, started his career with Central Parking under Monroe Carroll in Nashville in 1979. In the meantime, he has moved on to Houston, where he moved in 1988, but he definitely has some deep roots in Tennessee, so we get to hear stories about Central Parking from him often. As we all know, Central Parking, by way of SB Plus, has merged with Metropolis. It's been over several years, but Central Parking and Metropolis, they have roots in Tennessee as well. So we are excited to discuss this topic today with General Skrmetti. So General Skrmetti, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to the office of Attorney General of the state of Tennessee.
Yeah, sure. I am the Attorney General of Tennessee. I've been in that office since 2022. I worked for the governor before that. And before that, I was the Chief Deputy Attorney General. I was at a law firm, and I spent most of my career as a federal prosecutor, focused on civil rights work. That's what led me to move down to Memphis and become a Tennessean, meet my wife, a native Memphian. Consumer protection is one of the most important things my office does. And this has been a significant case for us. So I'm really glad to have the opportunity to come and talk about it.
Excellent. Well, as we know in the parking industry, technology is a global conversation. So technology is being created globally, but then we are trying to apply it locally. And that can come and introduce some problems or difficulties whenever we come to local regulations, local customs even, or norms in our area. Some of those just kind of don't fit in with some of the technologies that are available. So one of the things of this conversation, we're going to talk about how do we make sure that we are complying and committing ourselves to being good consumers of technology while also good vendors to our customers of that technology. So good stewards, basically. So let's jump right in. The Attorney General's office in Tennessee recently ruled in one of the largest parking settlements the parking industry has ever seen. Metropolis Parking has been under a years-long investigation in Tennessee that ultimately ended in an almost $9 million suit to end what the AG office described as deceptive practices by Metropolis. Our questions here are going to be derived with education in mind, along with the common goal of improving our industry and the customer experience. So, with that said, AG Skrmetti, can you help us understand that in our experience, it's rare for parking disputes to escalate to legal action? That doesn't really happen. So the vast majority are resolved at the local parking office level, and beyond that, alternative dispute resolution is the most practical and cost-effective approach. How did this parking experience find its way all the way to the Tennessee Attorney General's desk?
So we received more complaints about Metropolis than about almost any other entity. We had hundreds of complaints come in. And I think in most cases, you don't see legal action in parking because the amount at stake is so relatively low. Even with prices bigger, you're still talking about less than $100 most of the time. And so it doesn't make sense to go to court over that. But we had a lot of people who were really worked up about their experiences with Metropolis. And there were really 3 main buckets of complaints. The first was people didn't know how much they were going to be charged. There wasn't transparency with respect to pricing. The second was the license plate readers were just wrong. So, there was one time where I was charged briefly for parking in Seattle, Washington, and I was sitting at home in Nashville and got the text that said, but that was reversed very quickly. But there were other people who would get those charges and have to fight about it and prove that they weren't wherever they were supposed to be. So the technology just hasn't been working as accurately as you would hope. And then the third issue was customer service, where people felt like they were just not able to talk to a human to resolve their problems. They called over and over and over. They were very unhappy with their ability to get relief when they felt that they had been wronged one way or another. And we have just broad consumer protection laws, don't apply any differently to the parking industry than to any other industry, that requires transparency and honesty and good faith and opportunities for recourse for consumers. And so, we got these complaints. We started investigating. We received more and more complaints, and we were able to work with the company to find a settlement that would provide money for Tennesseans that had overpaid. It provided $2.5 million in parking discounts for customers as a way of making it. I don't think the company is allowed to apologize, right? Like, nobody ever admits to fault in these cases, but it's basically a goodwill gesture to customers in Tennessee. And then there are changes structurally so that there have to be prices posted. There has to be a functional consumer response line so people can actually call in and get answers and talk to somebody. And where the technology isn't working, it shouldn't be held against consumers. We recognize this is a developing industry. There's a lot of neat new applications for technology that should ultimately keep costs down. But as that technology ramps up, it shouldn't do so at the expense of consumers. If there are problems, that should be part of the cost of implementing the technology.
Absolutely. We've talked kind of at length here on the podcast about how important customer service is in the parking industry, that's one of those foundational pillars that parking was kind of built to the level that it's on now upon. So whenever we think about customer service and failing those customers, I totally agree that usually those complaints are handled at the local level because the amount is typically so low, like you said, under $100. But whenever you're seeing things happen where you're getting charged for being across the country whenever you weren't, we have to start considering what that means on a customer service level and how we get to more of that local focus to bring us kind of back. So whenever we think about license plate technology, it's really central to what you guys kind of researched and looked at for customer service. That's one of Metropolis's biggest features is the license plate recognition. And while it does work well for the majority of their parking sessions, it's those whenever it doesn't work well, and it's not Metropolis only. License plate still has a long way to go. We've seen, in states where there's stacked letters that's an issue. And, there's still a lot to do with license plate recognition to bring it up to 100%. We're close. I think we're on average at about 98%, but we owe it to that 2% of customers to get it where it needs to be. But in your opinion, what does it do well, and where does it require extra safeguards for parkers from that customer service aspect?
So, I think the first thing is just having someone to talk to, because there are going to be errors with technology. There always are. And the smoother the process is, the more people feel comfortable with it. If they can get the problem resolved, if they can talk to someone and explain their situation, it makes them feel better about the overall structure. If they feel like they're banging their head into a brick wall, then even if it works most of the time they use it, they're still going to resent it. They're still going to feel like they're being treated unfairly. Another situation that frequently arises is if people drive in, can't find a parking place, and drive out, they were still being charged for parking, even though they had a pretty minimal amount of time there. That's another thing the settlement addresses. But as you move away from more in-person parking oversight and automate more and more, there has to be some mechanism for ensuring that people are getting what they pay for. And in the old days, the parking attendant just waves you through. It's, easy peasy, you roll out, it's all good. Now that we don't have that personal touch, there has to be a technological accommodation. So, I think over time, the costs will come down. The technology will work better and better and better. But every time it doesn't, there has to be easy recourse for people. And if you make it excruciating when the technology goes wrong, nobody's going to notice that it goes right most of the time. They're just going to remember that they hate it.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. In the industry, we call that the grace period, that time period where you drive in and maybe you can't find a spot, or, oh, wait, I'm actually at the wrong address. I don't need to be here. And typically we see that about 10 to 15 minutes is the grace period that's either handled by the local attendant, like you're referring to, or programmed into the equipment. Now, whenever it's programmed into the equipment, that's where we kind of sometimes can see these stories where it falls short and doesn't actually account correctly. And then you come across those situations where you were in for 10 minutes and 1 second. That puts you over the grace period according to the technology.
Mhm.
So how is that handled? Typically it's with the local person that then comes out and supports the technology with that personal touch. But in this situation, it doesn't sound like that was really available. Thinking about transparency. So, whenever we drive into a parking facility, we like to have all of the information as we're driving in, either because we have been there before and experienced it. But if I'm heading to a new facility and I am making a decision as a consumer, I'm driving into the parking facility, I want to know what to expect upon my entry, not upon my exit, but
Mhm.
upon my entry. So, how does that play into this scenario?
It's hugely important. I mean, customers need to be able to make decisions. They need the information to make the informed choice of committing to a particular garage or a particular lot. And in Nashville, parking is massively important. It's a very, very car-centric city. There's a lot of really cool stuff downtown. For most people, the only way to get there is via car. And so parking is frequently used. Often there aren't a lot of options because lots fill up very quickly. But when you pull in, you need to know what you're getting into. And if the price is unusually high or if there's something else about it that creates a problem for you, you need to know so you can back out. But at the very least, you shouldn't be surprised when you have to pay on the back end. And so posting prices that are accurate and readily understandable is really important. And it's that way for every industry. It's not just parking, but because parking's seen so many changes so quickly, this is something that kind of had to be reinforced and reinvigorated. Most places, they post their prices very clearly or otherwise give you a way of knowing exactly what you're getting into. And where there's not that transparency, where you're depriving consumers of the ability to make an informed decision, that's a problem that violates our consumer protection laws. I'm really optimistic that the transparency piece is going to help people feel a lot better. Because for a while, you'd find a garage, you'd go in, you just know you were going to get killed on the back end. You'd have no way of even doing a rough calculation of what it was going to be. And now that people know, I think you're still going to have folks who are unhappy with how much they're going to pay for parking, but at least they know up front and they're able to decide before they commit to it whether that's something they're willing to do.
Yeah, to take the surprise element out of it is the goal, right?
Absolutely.
So, General Skrmetti, what is the risk when enforcement feels automated, but accountability feels manual? This automated enforcement feels like a slippery slope. How does that fit into your rubric of excellent customer service?
Well, I mean, if the company is going to have harsh penalties and they're automatically applied so that you have a pretty large number of people dealing with them, there has to be a mechanism for people to effectively contest that without too much work. And if you're in a situation, people have jobs, people have kids, people have all these commitments. They don't have time to call over and over and over again trying to get an answer. It's just not fair. And if the strategy is to wear down customers so that they just give up, we will enforce the consumer protection laws all day and all night to stop that kind of situation. I mean, people need to have recourse. And so the harsher the automated enforcement mechanism is, the more robust the accountability has to be. And I think that is probably a really significant part of this settlement in the long run is saying, all right, if you're going to have the machine ding everybody who breaks the rules, then you better have a person that they can talk to or some mechanism for them to call in if that's misapplied or if it's unfairly applied. Recognizing, yeah, that does impose a burden on the company, but it just has to be that way.
So, in your opinion, who's responsible for the accountability?
Well, I mean, ultimately, the company is responsible for justifying what it does. There will be records, there will be evidence of whatever happens with the consumers. The consumers have a right to find out what the company is using as a basis for penalizing them. They can contest facts. Because the license plate readers are not 100% accurate, there are a lot of instances where people legitimately were unfairly charged for whatever reason. You can't have an escalating series of penalties based on their noncompliance if you know that your technology is imperfect and if you know that there are going to be situations where that is not appropriate. There has to be some outlet for the consumers. So it really is on the company. The more remote they get in terms of the immediate enforcement, the more they have to be investing in back end customer service so that when there are imperfect applications, when there are problems, people have someone to talk to, people can get it fixed.
Absolutely. I think back to the history of parking and parking meters and parking maids with their chalk and, they were writing their tickets and how that has just totally transitioned to this automated, your license plate triggers the accountability piece and so the whole process has completely changed from, back to the root, how it started.
And maybe technology doesn't need to replace the human element. They need to work together. The humans must be accessible and present alongside the improving technology.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what you see in a lot of industries is people are leveraging technology to be more efficient, but there's still a human element there. It's not purely automated. In the long run, who knows? I mean, we may have robots out there instead of people, right? To provide the pseudo-human element there in addition to the readers. But as the technology progresses like that, there still has to be opportunity for people to, to push back and to have some sort of customer service interaction as opposed to just being at the mercy of the machine and, whatever it says goes when the machine's not perfect. And the amount of resentment that has built up over the very mechanistic application of penalties is incredible. There are a lot of people in Tennessee that don't like me for various reasons, but the feedback on the parking stuff is amazing. Like even people who are mad about most of the stuff that I do were so happy about the Metropolis litigation and the settlement. So I think that shows that there really is a widespread dislike of leveraging technology too far. It doesn't mean companies shouldn't push the limits and try to innovate, but they have to recognize that if people feel like they're being taken advantage of, if there's not transparency, if there's not accountability, they need to find a way to build that back into the system so that they can benefit from the efficiencies of the more automated approach without completely throwing their customers under the bus.
Yeah, that's a really solid point. I really appreciate the fact that we've all been consumers and we've all had really poor customer service experiences, every single one of us. But we've also had really good customer service experiences. And you touched on it earlier. We don't really typically make mental note of the really good ones. We make mental note of the really bad ones, and it impacts the reputation of that company that we're dealing with. And if that really bad reputation starts to spread, then that's where it gets brought to this level. And so what can other vendors do to avoid ending up on the Attorney General's desk?
So I think the solutions that are in place now for Metropolis that hopefully are going to solve a lot of the consumer problems are pretty good guideposts. So post the prices really clearly. Make sure everybody who comes in knows what they're getting into. Have some sort of grace period if you're relying on technology that's maybe more than the minimum. Maybe 10 minutes isn't enough because working through some of these lots can take a while. I mean, if there's a lot of traffic going on, you might be stuck waiting for other people to pull out or for whatever reason. There may be an extended period you can't do it. So as new technologies come in, maybe give a little bit of extra grace to consumers. And then the key thing is having some sort of human option on the back end so that if people are just so frustrated, they're able to actually talk to someone. And making them jump through hoops over and over and over again just makes them mad. And they're going to call me. Like if they can't talk to you, they are going to call me. And so in the long run, it's much better for you to have a way for them to talk to you. It makes everybody's lives better. So having real customer service, even if it's just a number that they can call and talk to someone in a call center somewhere, is so much better than trying to stiff arm the consumers.
General Skrmetti, one of the more interesting parts of the final order was this idea of government notices. So how important is it for parking communications to clearly distinguish themselves from government notices?
It's super important. It can't look like junk mail and it can't look like government correspondence. If people think it's the government demanding money, they have a much different reaction than if they know it's a company. They're not looking for customer service. They're worried about potentially being arrested. And so we see government imposter activity a lot here where people are trying to leverage the government identity to make it easier for them to get money out of people. That's bad. We don't like that. We don't want people to do that. It's not fair to consumers. And similarly, we see people sending out stuff that looks as innocuous as possible, knowing people are going to throw it away and then they could get hammered with additional penalties rather than, having to interact with them. So we need, again, more transparency. People need to know what they're getting into. Stuff needs to be clearly labeled. If it's designed to look like government literature, not only is that not fair to the consumer, that particularly irritates the government employees that are looking at these cases, because it's not just underhanded, it's infringing on, our turf. And we rely on the indicia of government stuff to get our communications through. And if that's getting diluted by people taking advantage of it, it's particularly bad because it hurts consumers and it hurts our office. So that is a big no-no. I'm really glad we got that sorted out as part of the settlement. Again, transparency is a core part of taking care of consumers and treating them right. And that means they need to know when they're hearing from you.
Absolutely. I do have one additional question. So tourism is a big economic driver for Tennessee. Do you think parking can actually have an impact on economic things such as tourism?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a fantastic lot that went in downtown Nashville that's really easy to use. It's really convenient. Metropolis acquired it a little bit ago. And I think, that garage has marginally improved tourism, probably brings more people downtown than would otherwise be there because it makes it a much easier experience. So the easier you make it for people to get there, to use the lot or garage and to get out, the more you're promoting local economic activity. So good parking is really important. We are not anti-parking. We just want to make sure it's fair to consumers, that it's treating them right, that you've got the transparency and accountability that you need. So yeah, absolutely tourism can be improved by good parking.
We completely agree. Parking can have an impact on the local economy. We've all had good parking experiences and we've all had poor parking experiences. And that kind of helps us determine if we want to revisit a location that we've been to previously. And it plays into our decision making. So we totally understand that. One of the goals of this podcast is to provide knowledge and resources. So we hope that our listeners have taken a piece of knowledge or been able to identify a resource where they can improve their parking operation, or they know who to reach out to. Parking is such a localized yet globalized industry that it's really difficult to make sure that these globalized concepts fit into the mold of the consumer rights, the local economy, and everything that we have to do on a local level at our unique locations. So General Skrmetti, thank you so much for your time today. We really enjoyed this conversation, and we hope that all of our listeners will come back and join us on Our Parking Industry podcast. To quote one of the greatest business minds of our time, Charles Munger, he said, "The best thing a human can do is help another human being know more." Here on Our Parking Industry podcast, we want to provide knowledge and resources. If you heard something that sparked your curiosity in today's episode, please reach out on our socials at TPN Consulting. You can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe and follow. See you next time on Our Parking Industry.